And the topic basically today is like, there's a lot of like famous photographers out there. Like this is a photo from Annie Leibovitz, and we can have like another photo of her, Annie Leibovitz. So if you like most of the past like famous photos that you know from people are from her. She's like very, very influential, has made a ton of iconic photos for the press, for the Rolling Stone magazine, stuff like that. I'm trying to find a good example here. Like, for example, this photo here is very from Meryl Streep, very famous from her. And there's, of course, a lot of other photos that she's famous for. Where's the I guess most people know that Whoopi Goldberg photo. This one here. Where is it? That one. Pretty famous, right? Everybody knows this picture. So she, whoop, no, I don't want to save that. I just want to open it in a new tab. Can it not? Okay. Anyways, okay, so this photo here. And then, but also she's making photos like this here. This is from the Monument Valley. She was flying around in a helicopter taking these photos, and they are blurry. And it's like it's not on the same amazing level. And this is what I find interesting about it. The question is, does it always have to be amazing? Do you always have to find something that is mind-blowing? Here's another picture that she took from a painter. Sorry, I forgot the name. Agnes something. Wait a second. Agnes Martin. This is a famous painter. Her name is Agnes Martin. And this is a photo that Annie Leibovitz, how do you pronounce that name? I don't know. Took of her. And also it's kind of a kind of a normal photo. Nothing amazing, nothing mind-blowing where you say, wow, you're moved by that experience, right? And I find this really interesting about photography on the perspective of, does every photo have to be amazing? Or maybe it doesn't have to be amazing sometimes. And of course, when you talk about a famous photographer, is also, of course, involved the legacy of that photographer. And that has a big influence on that, in the sense that if you're a famous photographer, you already have built a legacy for yourself, and that legacy is part of every photo you take. So you can, at some points, take photos that are not that mind-blowing, but still they carry on in that legacy because you have proven before, you've built up that image of yourself, you have shown your kind of idea and concept on that whole body of work over time, and these pictures fit in somewhere. So you can build an argument why it's still important to have these photos, right? While if I would take a photo like that, or if I would take a photo like that, you would be like, yeah, okay, not so great. I'm not gonna like write home about that, if you know what I mean, right? So that certainly has a lot to do with that. And of course, if you're a very experienced photographer with a legacy, with a history, people expect from you that you have a lot of background that you put into that picture of why you do it a certain thing. There's a lot of thought and ideas and concept behind that. So that can also make it interesting, right? To do something like that. On the other hand, I find it's an interesting question to ask, that does every photo, do you always have to attempt to do something special, or can you sometimes just take a photo? And you can use the chat to write there, and then we will talk over the chat, because that with the Zoom call that didn't work so good. So let me know. And we also had a conversation on Facebook about that. Maybe I can read these, some of the Facebook comments. Let me open up that over here real quick so I can find that post. And I find that a really interesting thing, especially in today's photography, where it's much more open. It's much more in social media, where we share it with a lot of people that we either barely know or don't know at all, but they see the pictures and we want to show off something. and build a certain kind of reputation maybe, or a certain kind of image that people have of ourselves, right? So you how do you say, you not parade with it, but you know what I mean. You kind of represent, like when you're wearing a suit when you go to the theater or something like that. You're not going like with your jogging trousers and your like dirty shirt. You try to dress up for that occasion, and this is something people also do on social media to show a better life and a better expression than they have in their everyday life, right? So maybe that also happens to photos, right? Let me see. So the Zoom, I should delete that post about the Zoom call maybe, so people don't join in there, because that's already gone. Oh, and I wanted to search for that post. Sorry, I have to do that. I forgot about that. 1 second. I'm looking on my second screen right now. Let me see. Where is that post? And feel free to write the same things in the chat so we can talk about that. And I hope it's okay that I show these comments or read them. Should I maybe not show them, just read them? I'm not sure. Let me know. Just viewed a YouTube video wherein a photographer offered 7 tips on composition for shooting architecture. I think it's worthwhile to go out shooting with a compositional intent. Yeah, but that's absolutely true. But there is a session from Annie Leibovitz, actually. She has on masterclass.com, she's doing a session. And in that session, like a lecture, basically, right? She says, go out and take photos with the eyes closed. Just stand on a point and make photos in different positions. By the way, I didn't post my photo yet. I have done the photo. I should also show you that. And that's actually a very interesting exercise. Let me pull up these photos real quick. There we go. Okay, let me push this over here. So these are photos that I've taken with my eyes closed. There's kind of this little, how would you call that? Little I don't know the English word for that. Like little sitting place with the roof over it anyways. I stood there. It's completely trashed with all the graffiti. So I thought that could be an interesting aesthetic. And then I took all these photos with the eyes closed with my smartphone. So it's pretty simple. And then the interesting thing is that I just moved, like with closed eyes, the camera around. So I don't really see the composition. I have a certain feeling of what is going to be in the picture, but I don't know exactly what's going to be. And I feel like a lot of these images are pretty dynamic and pretty interesting from, I wouldn't necessarily have photographed it in that way, right? So you find certain things, certain ideas, certain concepts that you might like and maybe try the next time, right? As a lot of things, like you can see here, this where you say it could be interesting structure in that, and maybe through editing you can do some more with that, right? So it's not just the image itself, it's also what could you do with this image afterwards, right? And it's interesting, right? You learn something about yourself in a way, or about photography that you wouldn't do in the same way. Because the thing is that I also feel about myself is, of course, when I take photos, they always look like my photos. I photograph in a certain way. The interesting thing is, for example, my mother photographs in a different way. She takes really great photos, but in a way that is more static, because she photographs the subject rather than the photo as a concept, right? While from my perspective, often I take photos as a concept, and so they have a certain dynamic in it, a certain perspective, and hers is mostly like head on onto the subject, because the subject is important, what is happening in the picture, rather than the composition. So different approach. And I find it really interesting, right? And so you have these pictures. Also, this is kind of interesting. I think if you edit this, you can make something interesting out of that, you know, with these shadows, with these kind of strange angles here. the stuff that's happening. So it's interesting and not something I would usually take, right? There's also one here from a lower perspective. Also nice. The place is so trashed, so dirty. If you look at it, it's really bad, but at the same time, not uninteresting, you know? So yeah, I found that pretty interesting. Of course, if you compare this to the photo of here of the Monument Valley, there is worlds between that, because I don't have that legacy, and I don't. This is just like a simple exercise, and this is a planned work with a concept that has become an exhibition, right? So I don't compare this photo with that photo. I'm showing this photo because she says this is a good exercise to do that. By the way, I should look at the Hi, Wildlife Wolfie. Oh, interesting name. From Finland. How you doing? Yeah, so we had these photos, and then also, the question is now, how do I find that? 1 second, let me open this up so I can show you this other picture, because this is also something where people said, yeah, but blurred photography is also interesting, which is going to be the next week challenge. By the way, I'm kind of, have to say, kind of disappointed that only like one person took me up on that challenge of just taking blind photos. I don't know why. Was it not interesting enough? Because I thought it was really interesting. You have to be a little bit more adventurous, right? Don't just feel like, oh, I already know how things are done and that's it. I don't need to do any training anymore. Just like give it a chance to exercise a little bit and experiment around, because you might find something new, right? Even if you're really good at something, there are a lot of things that you have never touched and that might still be interesting, right? So yeah, could be something, right? Let me find that photo here of the blurred shot. 1 second. And I did multiple, but I want to show you this exported photo. Actually, 2 of the exported photos. This is one of them. So this is the one that I took. Here's actually people in that, and I edited that a little bit to change the color. So that's the main change here. But the main concept, the main idea is that you photograph these pictures in a blurred state. Sorry, my sound is on here on the smartphone. I have to turn that off. And I found that very interesting. Just to walk around, set your camera to manual, set it to a blurred state, and then take photos. And the interesting thing about that is that you look at the picture, and the picture only tells you a small part of the actual information that you can get out of it, and the rest you have to imagine, because you don't really see like the pattern of the tiles or the material of that door frame. Could be wood, could be metal, could be something else, right? And this down there, what kind of dog is it? You don't see it. It's just a blob, right? So it's like reading a book where you get some of the information through the text, like a person was walking her dog at night, but you have to imagine, what does the person look like? What is the street looking like, right? So that kind of dreamy information, I found that really interesting, that you can create that in a photograph. And then we have this photo here, which is of a, how do you say, petrol station, basically. And again, you don't really see that much in the photo. And the interesting thing is, I will show you in a second, when you edit that, because there is so little information in that picture, the editing changes it so drastically that it's a completely different picture. In between, like between the different ways of how to adjust that. That is like really kind of mind-blowing. At where you are at a point where you don't even know anymore if there has ever been an original picture, right? Because there is so many variations that from the possibility of variations, every one of these variations is an actual, like, how can I say, finished solution to that photo. So you couldn't say that the other one is the original and this is not the original. Do you know what I mean by that, right? like musical notes. You can write musical notes on a paper, but then you can play it in 100 different ways with 100 different instruments, and all of these are legitimate versions of that song, right? That's what I mean by that. Let's look at the chat real quick. 1 second. But don't you find that every Mark says, but wait a second, I will move this over here so I can look into the camera while I read that. There we go. Oh, the thing moved away. Anyways, okay. Mark says, but don't you find that even your experimental outings benefit by structure or photographic guidelines? Yes, they do. But the experimental part is that you find new things about yourself by losing control. That's the interesting part here, is that you give up some of the parts, or you randomize some of the parts, and through that you get a new composition, right? You have a similar way in writing, for example, where you write down, a sentence, and then you cut up the individual words, and then you mix it, and then you put down the words again, and suddenly you have a different sentence that might open up a new angle, right? And so this is kind of similar, right? Where you have your camera with you, but then you photograph in blind ways where you don't know where it's pointing. So you have selected the place and the daytime and stuff like that, but then you don't really know what's the picture is going to be. And you take like 10 or 15 pictures, and one of them might be interesting, maybe none of them might be interesting, but you have new kind of perspectives on yourself. You might find something that might be interesting to you, right? Chris says, is there a way to share without Facebook? Not at the moment. Everything is right now, the group is on Facebook. Yeah, so there is not really any kind of platform, sorry, where you can do that. Although my Patreon page has a community section, so there you technically can post things. Yeah, so that's a possibility, right? Yeah, so let me switch here real quick over to this view here, so I can start the software, because I want to show you with that. Oh, this is still open. That's not good. 1 second. Let me find the software. I can actually push this button here, and then the software should open its own. Yeah, so let me know what you think about that. Yeah. I mean, have you seen the challenge that I posted? I haven't done a challenge since last December, so maybe people didn't expect that I post a challenge, but I have posted it on Facebook, and I've also posted it on in the YouTube community tab. So I think people should have seen it, and I'm not sure. 1 second. I have to find that folder real quick. 1 moment. These are the blurred shots. Yes. Okay, cool. Let me close this here. Okay. We can actually do it in a way where you can see also the other blurred shots. And I just, like in this kind, I also I combined it, where I not only took blurry shots, but then also didn't really look at the camera, right? I just took these shots. Here I looked at the camera, but then in the other shots I didn't look at the camera too much. I just took the photos and pointed the camera in a certain direction. But there's some fairly interesting results in here. Not all of them, but some of them. And we had before, why does this say only 10 images? 1 second. Reset. Okay. Oh, because the other ones are JPEG images, I guess. Yes. 1 second. I wanted to show you this one here. This one. Ah, yeah, and there we have some versions here. So this is actually the color version here. And you can see like, yeah, petrol station, interesting from the light and stuff. And then if you turn this to black and white, which I think for this kind of image is actually interesting because you lose even more information through that. Let me see here. I want to do this in JPEG, so it's a little bit easier on the computer while I'm streaming. And then we go here to silver. Do we go to silver effects? Yes, silver effects. Unique name, 1 second. And you can still use the chat, of course. Let me restore that real quick. I've seen a few before I got rid of Facebook. But why are people getting rid of Facebook? It's free. What's the element that's like not working? I don't understand that if there is something free, why would you turn it off? Anyways, and there's a lot of groups. I'm not using Facebook for friends anymore because that's kind of chatting maybe, but mostly for groups because the group interaction is just the interesting part, right? I don't want to see cat photos of my friends and what the last cake they ate. I want to see what groups are writing about all kinds of subjects, right? So 1 second. Ian says, a technical question. I never see you work with scopes in your workflow. Are you a fan of editing with scopes visible? What do you mean by scopes? You mean like, I know what you mean. Like there's a histogram on the side and there's also a scope. I rarely use that, to be honest, because I'm more working with the colors that I'm seeing on the screen right now. Because I'm not doing studio photography, I'm doing like artistic works, and there the result is more important than the accuracy to the original. So it isn't really that important if you have the exact kind of red or something like that you intended. Not of course that you intended, but that you have seen when you took the photo, because I'm going to change that anyways to a color that I like more, right? So I'm rarely using that, to be honest. Anyways, Jens is saying, I hope, let me know if this answered the question or not. Jens is saying black and white and blurred pictures have their own aesthetic. Many times you can get disappointed by comparing your own photos with pictures from other people. Yes, that's also true. Absolutely. Because of course other people do things in a different way that you're not used to. So the other side always feels a little bit fresher and more interesting and more exploratory because you see it fresh, how it's made, while for your own, you have to follow through all this kind of process of doing it. And then when you arrive at that point, it's already boring because you know everything about it, right? There is no secret, there's no mystery, it's not exotic because it comes from you, right? But this kind of randomness can actually bring that a little bit back, right? Where you don't have a complete control over the picture. This is kind of why this could be a nice exercise. Let's click here through some of these versions just from the presets. Is this happening? Yes, you can see here that this is happening. And you can see how much the image, the expression of the image is changing, right? From this very like white, open room, very bright, very shiny, and then here you have something very dark and mysterious, a little bit like a temple. Suddenly you see these kind of like columns that are going upwards and everything is a little bit more like in a church or something, right? So that's really interesting. Here's a little bit of a mix in between that, but this gives you more detail. You can see here there's a lot of stuff going on. In this you have a lot less detail. You have more structure, more abstraction also. So that is very, very interesting. And what I also found is you have here a slider. Where is that? Soft contrast. And if I move that, you can see how this is kind of moving the light from below to upwards in the picture. It's really strange. It's really interesting. So there's a lot of possibility to turn one photo into very, very different expressions, right? Of course, you see right now there is some stuff here happening that's not ideal. Don't look for that right now. I'm just showing you that how much the picture is changing. There is some fragments here that are happening because of the blurriness. Because the blurriness creates very soft gradients, and then you do some stronger adjustments, but they don't work so great with soft gradients, so you get this kind of banding here. So yeah, you need to take that into consideration. But this is just an example to look at how much these pictures can change from these different kinds of adjustments. And at a certain point, you really lose the kind of feeling of what has the original picture. Look at this, for example, how much suddenly the ceiling becomes like a sea of plastic. Everything is very smooth and connected and like a mist up there, right? Completely different to this, where you have these kind of light islands, and it looks like there's a reflection of something above. So they look like little heads that are standing out there. And this again, completely different again, So that is very, very interesting. And when you click around that and you make these settings, you so much lose the feeling for what the picture has actually been. It becomes this kind of very abstract mass that you can form in any kind of shape you want, right? And that's really surprising for something that is photography, where you think, but that could that should have an original, right? It's taking from a form of reality, basically, and here it's the furthest distance, I would say, from what you would say, this is the original, the real situation. So that makes it surprising. Sorry, I have to go back to the chat. My monologue is too long. I have to get better at that. Let me see here. Scopes RP. Parade. Yes, I know what you mean. Okay. Saib says, hi Olivio, do you have any recommendation for a camera with a price span from 400 to 600 and maybe it's capable of shooting decent videos? That depends on what you want to photograph, like what kind of thing you want to do with it, right? It could be like a pocket camera. It could be a GoPro is in that price range. It could be a cheap DSLR with a kit lens, stuff like that, depending on what you want to do, how big the camera should be, how rough the camera should be. There's a lot of different choices. So think about what you want to do with it. Like, do you need to have changeable lenses or not? Does the camera have to be small and light or not? Does it have to be rugged and get wet and maybe underwater or not? Because then you can decide. There is no DSLR you can easily take underwater, but you can take a smartphone underwater, GoPro underwater. Some of these pocket cameras can go underwater. So there's different questions to ask yourself what you want to do with that, right? Also, is RAW important? Are the adjustments important, like manual focus, manual like zooming, manual aperture settings and time settings and stuff like that, right? So that's important also. In your street shooting, do you have tips for how and when to engage people? I'm terrible with people in photography, but on the street, because they are strangers. How do you avoid provoking unexpected angry reactions from some who may not want to be photographed? Yeah, that's I don't know. I'm really bad with strangers, so maybe ask them beforehand if they want to have photos taken of them. Of course, then you lose that kind of moment of like where they are in their natural action, basically, right? So that's going away. It's difficult. And also it's a legal question, right? Because you can't legally photograph people in Europe. In most parts of Europe, you can't just take photos of people. You have to have their consent to do that. I think in America you can do that because it's the First Amendment right of artistic expression, but here you can't. So yeah, it's very, very difficult. And also I kind of, it's difficult. Look at this. It's just like a cloud of light bubbles. right? So different, so strange. And I know this is very different from what we usually do on the channel, but it's an interesting perspective into how far you can stretch photography and how far it becomes a medium that you can form into anything that is interesting to you. And I think that is actually a good starting point to think about the connection point between photography and editing and expression, right? Because taking a photo just to take a photo is more documentation, and it's of course also interesting, but that's just one very little starting point, right? That is the equivalent of writing in a diary what you have done that day. Like, today I stood up and I made a coffee and then I washed my face. That is not a novel. That is not something people want to read. It's what actually happened, but it's not really interesting, right? So you want to like fill it up with more the personal expression and the personal emotion that you have from that, right? So what happened at that day if you woke up, right? Was it a good, did you sleep well? Was it a nice day? Did you look forward to the coffee? Are you addicted to coffee, or is it just something you look like you like to drink? Or, you know, was the shower cold or hot? Or did you think about something? Did you sing a song when you took the shower or something? It's more interesting, more personal, right? And with photography, it's kind of the same thing, where you put kind of emotion and perspective and expression into the picture itself, and then it becomes something that is more useful and interesting for other people to look at, right? Because they don't want to see the object. Everybody has seen Notre Dame or the Eiffel Tower, or I don't know, the Taj Mahal, but they don't see it through your eyes. So you have to that perspective is interesting, right? Okay, let's go back to the chat. Oh, there's nothing new. Is there some history? No. Okay, good. Yeah. So, yeah, look at that. Also, when you come to France, this is, by the way, I have to show you this also. Let me find something where it looks a little bit normal, but we do have a frame. Let me see. Maybe not this one. Not this one. 1 second. Let me see. Let's take this one here. And now look at this. Is also a very interesting part. The frame. We talked about that before a little bit, but when you look at that in direct comparison, so right now you can see the image doesn't have a border, doesn't have a frame or anything around it. And this does put it on the same level as you are, because there is nothing that elevates it in any sense. It's just an image on your screen, and because of that, it can be compared to anything else on your screen or around your screen, right? But as soon as you add a kind of border to it, you can see like this, it elevates it a little bit. It separates it from the rest of the stuff, because everything that has a frame around it needs to have a frame around it for a reason, right? So you're like, what is happening there? Your attention is triggered and you separate it, and you try to search for a reason. Why is this separated from the rest? Why is it not equal to the other stuff and connected to the other stuff, right? So this kind of framing around it, that can be an important part that elevates the picture out of like just being normal and puts it a little bit on a pedestal. So that is actually a really interesting element. And you can see how much just by adding the frame, nothing else changes here. How do I turn this off again? 1 second. There we go. If I turn it off again, you can see how much this changes the content of the picture. Just a normal picture, something must be special about it suddenly because there's a frame, right? So that is, it's really interesting. And our mind, yeah, our mind just works like that, right? Of course, you can also have different kind of frames that are, they have different expressions to them, right? Let's go to the chat real quick. Sip says, I can't get the image of the temple out of my head. I just see the temple now since you said that. Okay. What kind of temple? The Taj Mahal or what? Is Taj Mahal considered a temple? I'm not sure. It's more mausoleum, but Panasonic. Okay, so there's some suggestions, so that's good. It's actually such a nice picture, really. This one here, because this is just a petrol station, it's not a temple. But thank you anyways, so that's good. And of course, you also have stuff like these different colorations, right? A little bit sepia, a little bit noise in there, makes it a little bit more classic or a little bit more modern. So there's a lot of expression in there. And also these kind of muted, turned down tones that you can have, like this one here. You can see how this is, when you compare this to that, it is a very different expression. If you have tones that are less loud, the image also feels more thoughtful, right? More sensible in a certain way, right? While when you have something that's more clear and loud and expressive, it feels more like it says something directly, shouts it at you, and has more of a harsh position, like a proud position, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't be that loud. And this one is more thoughtful and quieter and like, yeah, a little bit more reduced. So it's very interesting what we can do with these kind of things, right? By the way, we can also look at this with our, let's go here for the color effects. We can have a look at that to see different versions of the picture when it has color. By the way, also, we are still talking about this kind of concept of how amazing should a picture be, how amazing does a picture need to be, right? So I'm not sure how well these are going to work, but we can look through them. So these are presets from the Nick collection, basically. Look at this one here. Wow, okay, that's very different. Everything below is a dark blue, and then we have this very pronounced orange on the top. So that's pretty interesting. This is also nice. So it looks like a modern kind of, I don't know, a little bit like a movie and a little bit like a bad photo from the 90s, right? Strange. Interesting. This feels like a kind of, it has a bit more emotion. I feel like I remember kind of drunken nights as a student where you walk around like this and you have this kind of view in your eyes, you know? I feel like, ooh, look at this one here. Also interesting. And none of these are, and this is also an interesting part, none of these are things where you would say, yes, I go out and create something like that. This is more something that you don't find outside to create. But I feel there is also the point where things start to get interesting when you see things that you didn't expect, but they are still interesting. Right? Because if you create the same things that people have created for years and everybody knows they're going to be interesting, you're not going to do anything new. You're not going to be able to stand out beyond what has already been achieved, right? But if you do something that is unexpected, but then maybe it's nice, maybe you find a little niche where you say, oh, that's actually cool. There is something that is then your own kind of expression, right? So it's also very nice. Let's see in the comments. By the way, chip into the, take part in the conversation through the chat, right? I meant you said the columns of this gas station look like the columns of a temple. Oh, yes, I see. Yes, yeah, that's true, right? Yeah. It's also an interesting part. You could find these kind of associations by basically when you put some abstraction or some randomness to your creation, some elements get clearer that you can find in the image where you say, oh, as a gas station can look like a temple, right? Even if you didn't think about that before. But then if you have made that connection, you think about that more, you can make a story out of that. So that's another interesting part of that, because they do have elements of a temple, right? We all do this kind of, not all, but everybody who has a car, we do this kind of pilgrimage to that temple to get our little donation of petrol so we can travel the world, right? So you have to go there and you have to give your little donation there, and then you get something for that, and it has this built up with this amazing roof over it, and everything is a little bit in that way, right? So that's still interesting, right? And these are also connection points, which temples have been in the past, where people come together to meet. This is a very important part in a lot of different cultures, right? Where this is actually a meeting point where you meet strangers, you get help, you have conversations, you make deals, stuff like that. That's also part of the temple life in classic temples, right? And so this has a similarity to that in many ways. So that's interesting. Let's look at some other versions here. It's also kind of nice, kind of unexpected. And what I also find interesting about that is how, because it is blurry, these classic effects that you apply, these kind of presets, give you different results, because they are made for pictures that are sharp and crisp and have like a certain expression and a certain subject in it. And then you apply it to this, and suddenly it kind of doesn't really work. Because the presets are not made for that, but at the same time you get something that is really expressive and interesting, and you can find something new in that, right? Although I find really that in this case, less color is better, because the structure is so interesting. But yeah, it really depends. Like I also like this one because it's so over the top. You got this color banding again, so this is a little bit of a problem here with this picture. But then again, you see here these columns, it looks a little bit like flames. So also interesting, right? Also nice what you can get out of these kind of situations. By the way, also kind of a rare occasion here where you look at that, and this bright vignette, which I basically never use, makes sense in this case. That the vignette is brighter on the sides and makes it even more dreamy and even more blurry to your, how do you say, to the way you're seeing, to the way you're looking at the picture, like a mist that is happening around, and then you focus on the middle. Also interesting, right? Yeah, so I find that all of that pretty interesting. I have to sneeze 1 second. Let me mute the. All right, I'm back. Okay, so yeah, that's that. So I think this is gonna be the exercise for the next week with the blurry pictures. Ah, by the way, another thing. Let's also talk about that. Let me switch over here again like this. How do you feel? How is it for you to have regular, like a regular schedule, a regular exercise of photographing? Are you able to do that? Is that hard to do? Is it something you're even like interested in doing, things like that? Because I want to do a lot more photography, but there's always some like things in your life that need to be done, and then also you're not surrounded by things that are really asking to be photographed, right? Even if you can take your camera with you, you're just like in your neighborhood and you can photograph the same old park that you've seen 1,000 times, and the supermarket that's not really interesting. They're like, it's not like you're traveling all year long and have something amazing to look at every day. So at the same time, you think, well, I want to have more exercise and more the life of a photographer, but what am I going to photograph, right? So to find an interesting connection there and to create something that is, because there is a difference between just taking a photo and actually exercising in a certain way. And the big difference is that when you exercise things, you are looking at what you try to learn and you improve in that way. And of course, taking photos randomly on occasion is also interesting. You learn some stuff from that. But every part of photography has specific needs and specific skills that are required to do that. Like if you photograph architecture, there's a lot of knowledge on how to do that good. But the knowledge on how to photograph architecture is very different from how to do portrait photography. And so it's interesting that if you would want to like learn portrait photography better, you need to have the ability to photograph someone, right? So getting this kind of occasion regularly and improving in that way and maybe figuring something out. I feel like when you were a student, that was so easy because you always had people around you, other students, and everybody was like, yeah, okay, let's take some photos and then let's go to the next lecture. But when you're an adult, okay, that's not so easy because all of your friends have jobs and sometimes it takes weeks until you find someone to take photos with, right? So let me know how's your process in that area, right? All right. But yeah. there's so many elements to photography and to expressiveness, stuff like that, right? And it's really interesting to talk about that and think about that and make these different kind of challenges and things like that and experiment with that also, right? Because I think everything is kind of a long journey where going through that journey is a lot more interesting, a lot more rewarding than you try to aim for a single thing that you want to achieve, right? Yeah, and photography has a lot of these opportunities to journey all the time, but to figure out how to do that, that's probably doing these steps, going on that journey. That's probably the more difficult part to figure that out. Let me know in the chat how you think about that or how you are doing that, right? Today only water, no coffee. I try to get a better sleep schedule also. All right. So let me know in the chat. How long was the stream? Is about an hour, so we're not going to go for much longer. All right. Do we have some other photos to look at? You know, another topic that I find interesting is that when I look at these abstract photos, let me find a drawing. 1 second. What is the name of that? Artist? 1 second. Miro. 1 second. I'm trying to find a certain. I try to find a certain artwork by him that is very reduced. This is, well, not exactly what I'm looking for. Oh, there we go. This here. Is there a bigger version of that? Yes. Okay. Let's go. So let me switch over. Let's go here. Work life. No, that's the wrong one. There we go. Okay. So this is again this photo by Annie Leibovitz, and these are drawings by Jean Miro that are in the museum in Barcelona. And as you can see here, it's like a very big canvas which is mostly just white, and then there is one line on that, just one squiggly line on that huge canvas, and there's multiple of these canvases around that. But the interesting thing is I can connect better to these lines and understand them more than I can understand this photo, right? Which is interesting. But when I was thinking about why that is the reason, I think a big part of that is because when you start out with a drawing or with an artwork, there's nothing there. You start empty. You don't even know the material, right? And the material is not specifically made to create a picture. It's not like you throw a canvas against a wall and there is a picture automatically there, and then you decide how you want to adjust that picture. You have to decidedly create every element in this picture and specifically decide what kind of materials you're going to use to create these parts of the image, right? And so there's a lot of decision in there. And because of that, the reduction and the abstraction of these elements, they have the same amount of meaning as if you would create a really elaborate landscape or a portrait or stuff like that with similar materials, right? Because it's still an expression of what you want to show, right? But with a photograph, there's already a picture there, right? Everybody can just stand there and the camera is built in a way that it makes a picture. Even if it wouldn't be a person that pushes the button, you would still have a picture. Even if it would be an automatic process where at some point randomly the camera would take a picture, it would still be a picture, right? So I think that is the big difference for me, where there is the disconnect between this you have to do from the scratch, come up with an idea and execute that and make it into something that's an artwork. While in this case, the camera is taking a picture, it's already there, and you make decisions on top of that. So you modulate the thing that the camera is creating, and that's a different process, right? And so the distance between just a picture and an artistic picture is smaller, if you know what I mean, right? Because everybody can create that picture with the camera, and the camera itself can create the picture without a person. While here, there is always an effort involved, right? Does it make sense? Let me know in the chat. If the chat is not visible right now. There we go. The gallery photo is about a space and a one-point perspective to allow portraits. Loneliness and poverty of the person. I actually don't know about that. I haven't read about that photo because this is a famous painter. I'm not sure if she was lonely or poor. I think she was pretty famous and rich at that point when the photo was taken. But I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. And this is not about the photos. It's about the drawings at the wall. Right, the space and the one-point perspective. So this is more about I'm not talking about the photo here. I'm just showing you this photo because I didn't find individual photos of these drawings. But it's actually just a line on a canvas, and it's pretty impressive when you're there and stand in front of that, and you're like. I mean, for me, the impressive thing is that someone makes that and hangs it in a museum, and you go there and you are amazed by that, right? And that alone is this element of, oh, this could be art too. You can create this and it can have meaning, even though you would probably throw it away if you do it yourself. But if you're actually able to create meaning from that, it can have meaning. And that is like, you have to be really good at understanding art to be able to create something like that and make it art. So that's the difference. Everybody can create a line, but if you just draw a line, you're probably just someone who draws a line. Doesn't mean anything, right? Doesn't have any purpose. To make it into art, that is the huge very difficult step to do that. And if you're able to do that, that's a huge achievement, right? So that is the impressive part about that, where you would say, I couldn't do that in my life even if I tried to, but that person achieved that, right? To make it an important artwork, not just to say, oh, it's art. I made it, it's art. No matter if you count it as art or not, but to make it something that's important and actually influential in the history of art, that is the achievement. Not just making a line. Everybody can make a line. And this is also the thing that a lot of people don't understand when they go to a museum. They say, yeah, but my kid can do that. Yeah, but because you're an idiot, you don't know what is going on. Yes, your kid can do that, but your kid cannot make it into the biggest museum of the country and become a famous artist by the squiggly lines you put on your fridge. That's not the same thing, you know. There's no connection between that, right? So it's not about can you do that, it's about what has this achieved, right? You know what I mean? So you have this with a lot of things in life, actually, right? So yeah. Okay. I have to actually read about that artist more, to be honest. For me, the interesting thing was that this photo is very different from other photos she has taken. This is another famous photo here, although I feel like in all of his photos, he's really good with, this is from William Eggleston. Again, I don't know how to pronounce that name, I'm sorry. Every of his shots are very good with color and composition and everything. So even though they look like, oh, it's just a random shot, it's nothing special, they are so iconic in their way that are created. For me, it's really hard to understand or to see something that is just a random picture, because I never see that in his pictures. They always have this kind of there's so much control and artistic skill in all of his photos. It's kind of, for me, unimaginable not to see that, right? Yeah, because if you look at others of his photos, there's always something in there where you think like, wow, the combination of these things, of the colors of everything, right? Who determines if it's art or not? Society, right? The people that's like, who defines how much money is worth, or who is the next god? Society. Who's the next president? The society decides that. And you're part of that. You're part of that voice. And you can decide, oh, this is going to be interesting now or not, right? You can decide for it. You can decide against it. So some societies say, yeah, that's the coolest thing ever. We are going to celebrate that right now. And then the next generation, or maybe 10 years later, everybody says, nah, that's the worst thing ever. We're not going to do that anymore. That's just, you know. And there's a lot of examples of artists who have been super big and super famous, and then nobody cared about it. Like 10 years later, it was the biggest thing ever at that moment. And then a short time later, everybody was like, no, not really. Right? I saw a video today about the film Avatar by James Cameron, and how it had no influence on anything artistically as a film. Like, from the techniques that they have invented for that film, yes, but there is no Avatar-ish kind of films, right? Because if you have other films, they have influence, they have created whole genres of movies, but Avatars is like, And I found it interesting because, yes, actually, there's not really anything that is like Avatar inspired in that way. It was great at that time and it was cool as a movie, but it didn't really leave any kind of huge impact where you would say, oh, that's the kind of, this kind of thing. You know what I mean? If I understood that right. It can't be determined since 100% subjective, as Olivia said. The only value possible is it's like notoriety. What is notoriety, by the way? Sorry. What is it? That English word, what does it mean? Notoriety. The state of being famous, well known. Yes, I would say so, right? Like, for example, in pop culture, it's the interesting thing. In pop culture, there's a lot of things that seem to have a huge impact, like they were the biggest thing ever. But actually, they're not that important when you are in that area, right? Of science or of art or of something. They get hugely celebrated in TV shows and in whatever. Like, for example, Sigmund Freud. The father of psychology, blah, blah, blah. He's not that important, really, because he wrote a lot of stuff that had a lot of influence in his time, but has been disproven since. And he's like interesting and still getting studied, of course, but the stuff he said, a lot of that was actually wrong. So it's not he's not the father of modern psychology in any stretch of imagination, I would say. I'm not a psychologist, but from what I've heard from people who actually do that, they say no, it's nice, but no, you're not doing it like that. Right. And there's other examples like that where like, oh, that's kind of they push it up so big, but actually, anyways. Okay, we're going in the wrong direction here. Let's talk about the photos. Yeah. So yeah, I find that really interesting. That but let's go back to this kind of photography where I say, well, this is kind of a photo that if I would take it, nobody would care, but because this famous person has taken it, it's really huge. Is still that kind of perspective to say it opens up a door and an opportunity and a perspective of what you could do and what can be interesting to do when you pay a lot of attention to it, because this is the important thing. A lot of people have done blurry photos of the Monument Valley and threw them away and didn't think about them. But if you are able and have the size and the legacy to put that front and center into the like awareness of people, and they really have to think about that, then it's not thrown away. And then you have to think about, is there something that we can find in that makes us better artists or understand culture better or whatever, gives us a new perspective on life or any kind of thing? And that's the important part, right? It's not, can it be done by everybody, but can you pull something out of that has a bigger meaning, right? And that is more important than anything else, right? I would say a very simple example for that is, for example, steam power. We had steam power for thousands of years. People knew about steam since they have seen the first steam, right? It's not something that's amazingly complex. You cook water, it makes steam. It's one of the simplest things that you get, right? Even if you breathe out, you make some kind of steam when it's cold. But we didn't use it for anything because people were like, yeah, it makes funny air. It's kind of cloudy. It looks like a cloud. But we didn't use it for anything. And then we used it for something, boom, industrial age. And boom, afterwards, like a huge explosion of technology, right? So there's a huge difference between every idiot can make steam, but you need to have a genius to actually use steam in a purposeful way, and then actually be not just a genius to understand that, but the genius to change society around that, to say, yes, we can not only use it, but we can make something amazing with that. And that's the huge difference between someone who takes a blurry photo and someone who makes an amazing artwork that is also a blurry photo, right? So this is maybe an easier way to understand that. Let's go back to the chat. Mark says, you remind me now of the hype surrounding Jeff Koons. Jeff Koons does really great art. And he is like, a kind of a child of our society and of the New York culture, American culture maybe, and the reference back to that. So there is a lot in there, right? And I really like his blown up sculptures, right? These kind of like, wait a second, let's pull up one of these things here. Um, 1 second. This. And this is made from glass. It's really big. It's not just a small thing. Like there's also small versions, but there's also like really big versions made from glass. But this really, I mean, if you think about culture today and who we are and what we do with our lives, and this is not done in the reference of social media, but if you think about social media and what kind of stuff we do every day and how we blow up things out of nowhere for no reason, what better symbol for our society than a huge blow up puppet that is shiny and is in the size of a god monument in a room, right? Room filling, blow up child birthday party, because this is actually what social media is. If you go on TikTok today, you see thousands of people who want to build their fame on being a sexy dancer or making some really cheap jokes about 5 things architects say, or things that go wrong at your, I don't know, fast food parlor, you know? So that, I think, yeah, this is a great work. This is a great statement. Of course, he didn't make it in the reference to social media because this happened long before social media, but I mean, it wasn't much different back then, you know? So I find that really interesting. So yeah, that's, art has a lot to teach if you look at, not like, I mean, art, I think there is 2 ways to look at art. One way is what the artist wanted to say, and this is mostly what we really don't know about, because artists very rarely talk about what their art means. And then you have what you think about the artwork, what you get out of the artwork. And that's actually the important part, because there the artwork becomes disconnected from the artist and from the original expression, and there is where it grows to something that has cultural and social impact, right? And where we see something in it that has actual value for us and that teaches us in a certain way. And most of the time, the art that does this has created a long time before this stuff is happening in society, because at that time, we didn't know about that, right? And when we would do it now, it would be too close to us. So you need a certain time distance also. So that's actually a kind of important part about that too, right? Yeah, anyways. Okay, lots of talking today. How are we? 1 hour, 20 minutes. Okay. I think, yeah, we are, that's it for today. I hope that was interesting. This was less about Affinity Photo. A little bit of Nick Collection was in there. I hope you enjoyed that. And yeah, thank you very much for joining my live stream, and see you soon. Let me know if you enjoyed the live stream in the comments, or yeah, on Facebook, and see you tomorrow in my next tutorial. Good. Have a good night. Bye.